Hello, and welcome to Principles of Macroeconomics. This is Module 2.3, and we'll be discussing unemployment and the labor market. So to start off with, when we think about the labor market in an economy, this is reflecting the amount of employed and unemployed people in the economy. When we have unemployment in our economy, this is essentially a mismatch between the number of jobs available and the number of people that want jobs in our economy. When economists look at unemployment numbers, they look at both cyclical unemployment and the natural rate of unemployment. The cyclical rate of unemployment shows actual unemployment that is occurring in the economy, whereas the natural rate of unemployment is estimated. We'll talk about these two measures in a little bit. Now, let's talk a little bit more about labor statistics and the labor market. To start off with, we look at the labor force. And the labor force is going to be the sum of unemployed people and the number of employed people. So it's the total amount of people essentially that want jobs in the economy, regardless of whether or not they have them or can get them. Next, we want to look at the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. So to calculate this, we take the number of unemployed people in the economy divided by the total labor force of our economy multiplied by 100%. And that's going to give us the percentage of people that want jobs but can't find them. Next, let's look at the labor force participation rate. This is the percentage of the adult population that is in the labor force. So this is taking the total labor force, the amount of employed and unemployed people, and dividing it by the adult population. So the amount of people over the age of 16 in an economy. We multiply this by 100% again, and this is telling us the percentage of adults that are in our economy that are either employed or unemployed and are actively participating in the labor force. So here, let's take a minute to try to work out these numbers and practice these calculations together. You can pause the video at this time and try to calculate the numbers that you see on the table, and then come back for the explanation and analysis that I'll do with you. Okay, so here at this table, you can see that we have two countries, country A and country B, and we have a series of numbers. We have the adult population, the labor force, the number of employed people, the number of unemployed people, the unemployment rate, and the labor force participation rate. So we want to be able to calculate these gaps. So let's get started. The first thing, we have the unemployment rate. So in country A, we have enough information to be able to calculate what this rate is. We simply take the unemployed number of people divided by our labor force multiplied by 100%. And that gives us an unemployment rate of 9.51%. Next, we can calculate the labor force participation rate. We have the labor force, and we have the adult population. So we simply divide our labor force by the adult population multiplied by 100%, and that gives us a labor force participation rate of 72%. Next, we can calculate the number of employed people. So we can find what we would call the employment rate. We take 100% minus the unemployment rate, which is 9.5%, and the remaining amount is giving us the percentage of people that are employed in the economy, or 90.49%. We can take the 90.49% and multiply it by the labor force, and that gives us the percentage of the labor force that is employed, or 48,800 people. Now, our calculations for country B. Here we can find the labor force by taking the labor force participation rate and multiplying that by the total adult population. That's giving us a labor force of 27,600 people in country B. Okay, and now we can calculate the number of employed people in country B. So notice that we have the unemployment rate and we have the labor force participation rate. So we simply take 100 minus the unemployment rate of 8.8%, and the remaining amount is going to be our employment rate, or 91.2%. So we take 91.2%, the percentage of people that are employed in our labor force, multiplying it by the labor force, and that tells us that the total number of employed people is going to be 25,171. So there are some shortcomings in the way that we calculate the unemployment rate. There are certain things that the unemployment rate cannot capture. One of these is what we call the number of discouraged workers in our economy. So there are situations where a person is looking for a job and it's taking many, many months, and eventually they get discouraged and they leave the labor force. To be considered unemployed, you have to be actively searching for a job. So you have to be sending out your resume, you have to be applying to jobs. Once you stop doing this, you are no longer considered part of the labor force. So the unemployment rate won't take into account the number of people that have been looking for jobs but give up and leave the labor force. Of course, these individuals, in many cases, if they were offered a job, would happily accept. It also doesn't distinguish between the number of people that are working part-time but would rather be working full-time, or the number of people that wish they could get full-time jobs but are stuck working multiple part-time jobs instead. It also doesn't take into account people that might misreport their status to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it cannot necessarily account for the difficulty of finding a job after a long break in your employment record. So if you've been unemployed for a long time, or if you've taken a hiatus from working, the difficulty with which it takes for you to find your next job isn't accounted for in the unemployment rate. Next, we want to talk about the difference between cyclical unemployment and the natural rate of unemployment. So as I mentioned previously, remember that the natural rate of unemployment is estimated by economists, whereas the cyclical rate of unemployment is what's actually reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what we see is that the natural rate of unemployment as an estimation is essentially what would naturally occur in the economy if we take away the business cycles, whereas the cyclical rate of unemployment fluctuates around the natural rate. So let's take a look at a graph. Here you can see the unemployment rate as it's reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see that the unemployment rate spikes when we have recessionary periods, and it dips down and it falls when we have recoveries. Now, if we overlap this with the natural rate of unemployment that's estimated by economists, we can see that cyclical unemployment fluctuates around the natural rate. So why do we have a natural rate of unemployment? Well, there are both frictional and structural factors that determine the natural rate of unemployment. So frictional factors tell us that unemployment is inevitable in the economy. Frictional factors tell us that there's always going to be a slight mismatch between the number of workers and the number of jobs available. It takes a little bit of time to find that best fit for you if you're in between jobs. Structural factors are related to barriers in the labor market that occur, which prevent people from finding the jobs that are available, or a mismatch between the types of workers that we have and the types of jobs that are available. So let's look at a couple of examples here. Let's say Jeremy is graduating from his MBA in December and he's looking for a job in Boston. Would this be considered structural or frictional? This would be considered frictional unemployment. It takes a little bit of time for Jeremy to find the right fit for him. Next, let's think about a situation where the minimum wage laws are increasing in New York City to $15 an hour. McDonald's has decided to replace its service staff with electronic terminals where customers can place their order. Would this be structural or frictional unemployment? This would be considered structural unemployment because here this technological advancement is causing workers to not be used anymore by McDonald's. So therefore, because the wage rate has increased because of the minimum wage laws, McDonald's prefers to make the capital investment to buy the terminals rather than hiring workers for those jobs. Now, what about Sarah that has been laid off from a position in her publishing house and she's applying for different positions to make a career change? Is this structural or is this frictional? This would be considered frictional unemployment. She's in between jobs and she's trying to find the next best fit for her. There are some causes that are specific to the structural unemployment rate. First, we can see technological advancements. The automation of jobs may eliminate the demand for labor in to fill those positions. This is similar to the example that we saw of McDonald's. When the minimum wage law increases, because we have a technological advancement that allows people to place that order instead of working directly with an individual, well, McDonald's might opt for the technologically advanced terminal to take those orders instead. Secondly, unemployment insurance. When the government provides temporary payment transfers to alleviate the hardships of unemployment, it creates an incentive for people to take a little bit longer to find that next best job. So for example, a country that has unemployment insurance of 6 months versus a country that has an unemployment insurance of 2 years, the one with 6 months unemployment insurance is going to probably have lower unemployment rates rather than the one with unemployment insurance of 2 years. Next, minimum wage laws. Minimum wage laws create a mismatch between workers that want the job at the higher minimum wage rates and the jobs that are available at that wage rate. This mismatch is going to cause unemployment. Next, unions also make it difficult for employers to pay at the equilibrium wage rate. Because of collective bargaining, they push up the wage rate above the equilibrium wage, and therefore cause a mismatch between the number of workers that can work union jobs and the number of union jobs that are available, and thereby causing unemployment. And lastly, what we call efficiency wages. Here, employers are choosing to pay more than the equilibrium wage. They do this to try to promote worker effort, to try to attract higher quality applicants for the position, and to minimize worker turnover. So when this happens, the employer is opting to pay more than the equilibrium wage. Therefore, the number of people that would want the job would be more than the number of jobs that are available at the efficiency wage. Again, causing a mismatch between workers and number of jobs, or causing unemployment. So as you can see, unemployment is obviously a very important topic that we think about in economics. Understanding the labor market and dynamics of the labor market is important to understanding what is happening in our economy. The level of the natural unemployment varies because countries have different structural barriers in place. So some countries might have a higher rate of the natural rate of unemployment than others because they have more barriers in their labor market. And we see that the unemployment rate differs from the natural rate due to the short-run fluctuations in the economy, which also reflects fluctuations in output. Thanks so much for joining me in Module 2.3 on unemployment.